So the reason you would use onEdit function is when you want some script to be triggered when you basically type something in your spreadsheet, or you or somebody else, and hit enter. You want basically something to happen. A good example of that would be to add a timestamp maybe in a column when this happens, right? Something like that. So let's actually do that timestamp example to begin with, and we'll kind of see what are some things we would try to look for and see how we can deal with those things. So for example, if I had a couple of columns here, one I'm going to call, let's say, amount, and then we'll have timestamp. So what we want to happen here, every time we enter some sort of amount in this column, we want a script to be triggered to enter when that was actually entered in the cell. So for that, we can go under extensions and use some script, app script. And here we need to use this onEdit. It's a special function. So I'm going to type function and onEdit. It has to be typed exactly like this, with lowercase on and uppercase E. Everything in JavaScript, when you write the scripts, is case sensitive. So if you have something that's not uppercase or lowercase, it's going to stop working. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add this E parameter, and that's our event parameter. That is going to be here. Now, if I wanted this E right here to be used, basically what that E is, it's going to give us information about the cell or the range that was actually modified here. So for example, if I go to this cell and type like Apple or something like that, or type like 15, as soon as I hit enter, that hitting enter is going to run this onEdit function right here. And here we can now access different things about that function. So one of the things you have to know about this is that this E will have something in it that's going to be the range that was actually modified. So to give you an example, if I just do a constant here, and I'll just call this range modified, I'm going to do E.range. So this E has this range property in it, which is going to be the range that was modified. So just to quickly have some idea what's going on here, let's just do a console log and take that range modified right here. And on this, we're going to do some sort of method to get what cell was actually modified. Now, since this is not going to give me any autocomplete, I'm just going to do a trick here to just get some range autocomplete. We're not going to use this line. It's more like to get some autocomplete. So see, there is, for example, this thing that's called get A1 notation. I'm going to use that over here. And open close parentheses, and we'll comment this line because we don't want this to run at all. Okay, so basically right now I'm gonna have this range modified, and I want to see what was modified. And what we're gonna do here, we're just gonna get A1 notation, which is that familiar reference we have in spreadsheets like A1, B7, G8, something like that. Now, one thing you want to kind of remember here is that you cannot run this function here. You don't want to hit run on top here. That's not going to work, because this is a special function that only runs when you actually do some modifications here. So you should let the function run automatically. If I just save this, if I go here and type, let's say in the C3 cell, I'm going to type 77 and hit enter, what that's going to do is going to automatically run this function. Now, I can't really see those results here because it's a function that runs with that trigger automatically. But if I wanted to view this log someplace to see what exactly is going on, what I would do, I would go to the left here and click on this executions. And seeing this executions is going to show me that it ran that onEdit function, the time and the date when that happened. And then it says it's completed. So if there's an error in your script, you would see like failed or something like that here. Right now it says completed, so that means there was no errors. So if I click on this one to see what happened, see, it gives me that console log. And that console log outputs C3. C3 meaning, if you remember, I entered this 77 in that C3 cell. Now, if I go, for example, here and enter 55 and hit enter, see, now this was like E5, right? If we go back and look at those executions, see, just ran that execution. I'm going to open this and see now it says E5. So now I can see which cell was actually modified right here. So we got E5 here, we got C3. So anywhere else I go and do any changes, it's going to keep happening. So if I go here, again, just type 44. Now I'm in A8. You'll see I'll go back here and open, see, that trigger. And sometimes it may take a little time. See, there's no logs yet, so you may have to refresh this a couple of times until it gets there. There it is, A8. So you can see that I'm able to get which cell was modified. But one thing that's interesting is that it's not going to tell you what particular sheet this was on by just looking at this. So just to give you an example, if I go here below and add another sheet down here, now I got sheet 6 and sheet 8, completely different worksheets. If I go to this one and enter, let's say in this D1 cell, I enter some number and hit enter, that's also going to run that function. So now it's going to tell us that we modified D1 cell. So if I just go back and take a look, it's kind of still running it. I'm going to give it a second. Open this and see it says D1. So this is going to happen across all tabs. As you can see, no matter which tab we're on, as we keep typing something, it's going to basically trigger that to run. Now, what about the sheet? How can we know which sheet was actually modified? So what we could do, we could go back to the script editor here instead of executions. And in that same E, there's actually something that's going to be also source, which is going to give you the source spreadsheet. There are different ways to get to this. You can get it directly from the range 2 if you wanted to. You can also go from the source spreadsheet. So one way is to use that source. So E.source would refer to basically the source spreadsheet, not the worksheet, but spreadsheet. Now, we could also use the range for it. So, for example, if I go back to this and remove this and do get, so I can get some autocomplete, you can see that here we're going to have a lot of different things we can get about this, including like notes and things like that. But if I keep going through this, like there's get values, there's probably going to be something like get range somewhere in here, or get sheet or something like that. Let's see if we can get that. See, get sheet. And in this get sheet, if we just wanted to know which worksheet that is, we could do something like get sheet name, like this. And that should give us what's the name of that particular worksheet. So again, what I'll do, I'll just copy paste this. Now remember, I'm just running this line so I can get some autocomplete for this method, but I'm not going to use this. What I wanted here is to find out what these things are called. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to use that here after that range modified. Just one dot here. Comment this line. So now I have two console logs. One of them, as you can see, is going to give me the cell that was modified. And the second one should hopefully give us the worksheet that was modified. So let's save this and try this. So if I go back now, I'm on sheet 8, as you can see. I go here and type something in B2 cell. That should now trigger that function. And we'll go back. Again, you're not going to see here in the log anything. So you're going to look at your logs, in this case, for a trigger under executions. So I'm going to go here and open this. And you can see now it says it was B2 cell and it was on sheet 8. So this way now I can know which sheet was modified and what cell was modified. Now, in addition to seeing the cell was modified, we can also get the column number that was modified and the row number was modified. Again, basically anything you can get out of a range, you could get out of this range modified. So I could keep going back to this. And if I remove this part when I did this get active range and do dot, anything we see here, we can get, basically. So if you look here, for example, there's get column, there's get border, there's any of these things, get background. So for example, if I do get column, that will allow us to get the column. And as you can see, returns the starting column position of a range. So that's going to be that. So let's add a couple of things like that here. So I'll just do a couple of lines here and we'll do this get column here as well. And then finally, let's also add something like get row. That should also be useful for us. Right there. And then a couple of other things I'm going to do here. Well, I guess we'll come back to those later. For now, let's just comment this. And since these are just going to be logs without any explanation, I'm going to add a little explanation here. I'm just going to say A1 notation for this. We can comma separate this so that we have some sort of description when we do this console logs. So we'll do sheet name. We'll do column number. And finally, we'll do row number for this one. So I'm going to log out these 4 things. So at this point, if I save this, go back, let's go back to sheet 6 here. And if I, for example, type something right now in this cell, C5, hit enter, that should trigger that function to run. And if we go back and take a look on the left, under executions, apparently I have failed. So I'm going to have to see what I did. I probably forgot to do something here. So can't see right away, but let's look at that actual failed and see what it says. So it says, see, get column is not a function on get sheet. So I tried to get the column from the sheet someplace. On, see, it says code 756 right here. So that means if I go back to this and I look at line 7 right here, this get column here was done on the range. And here I did get sheet. Shouldn't be get sheet, it should just be get column, like this. And the same would apply to this. I'm going to save those. And again, go back and try to type something in, let's say, this cell. That would be C4 in sheet 6. So if I go back and look at my executions, see now it's completed. If I open this, it's still working on this. See, these logs may take a little time. So it's kind of annoying sometimes, but you have to deal with it. So just gonna keep opening it until it works. There it is. So now I have all the logs here. So you can see it says A1 notation is C4. That's the cell. We can see it was sheet 6 that was modified. The column number was 3 and row number was 4. So again, column number 3, 1, 2, 3, and row number 4 because I was doing this 88. So basically we can get a bunch of different things about all of these modifications. So the reason we need to get all of this is because if I wanted to, for example, add a timestamp here, when you enter an amount here, I want to check that the cell was modified was in this area, basically. So I don't want that timestamp to happen if I'm adding a number over here or I'm adding a number over here or something. I want to only do a timestamp here when these are the cells that are modified. And the way I can figure that out is by basically, well, I guess there are a bunch of different ways to go about this. One of them is by checking which column we're in and which row we're in. So we can say if whatever was modified was not in this third column, column C, then let's not basically do anything. So let's do that, and that would be third column. So what I can do, I can go back and do some sort of if statement here. I can say if that, see, this is what gave me the column number. So I'll just copy paste it here. I'm going to say if that is not equal 3, basically, then I don't want anything to happen. So I'll just do return here to stop running the rest of this. So this way, we will stop running anything if this condition is met. So we're saying if it's not 3, then stop. Now, we probably also want to make sure that in addition to checking this column being 3, we want to make sure that column 3 is happening in the sheet 6. Because you could go to the sheet 8 and type something here in this third column. It's still column 3. But it's not sheet 6. And that's where we're going to do another if statement similar to this one. So I'll go here and do if. And this time I'm going to use this thing over here. So I'll say if that is not equal to, again, that exclamation with 2 equals. And since that's going to be a name that should go in quotes. So I'm going to say if it's not sheet, I think it was called sheet 6 here. Let's go back and take a look. Sheet 6, then return. So this way, we want to confirm that this action, whatever happens, is happening on column 3. And it's happening on sheet 6, not on a different worksheet. You might also make sure that whatever you're doing is not happening in this first row where the amount is, because I don't want that to happen if we go and change this name of the column sort of thing. I only want to start from row 2 and go down. You could limit to a particular section here if you wanted to. That's really up to you. But what I'll do, I'll just do another statement here. And I'll say if, this time I'm going to check the row so that we can use this and paste it here. So I'll say if the row number is not equal, or I don't know, let's do if it's less than 2, that would be fine too, we'll return. So this way, basically I'm saying if the row number is less than 2, less than this, then it's going to be here, so we don't want to touch anything. Sheet 6 without space. Thank you. There is no space in the worksheet name, so let's fix that. So that's where we are so far. So these are just going to stop running some things at this point. Now, one thing you want to remember about this onEdit function is that You probably don't want to write all of this code within this particular function because you might want to use this onEdit function on other things too, in addition to just doing this. So therefore, at some point, we're going to move all of this code to its own function to make sure that we don't basically write all of this within this onEdit. But for now, let's just go ahead and add some sort of timestamp here now. So what we can do, we can basically grab the cell that was modified. And for the time being, I'll just go one column to the right from that cell and put some value here in this cell. So I can do that by taking that range modified. And here we can do basically different things. And again, you're not going to get this autocomplete. And if you don't know what options you have, you can just keep going to this, remove this part, and hit dot, and you're going to get what are your available options here. And one of those is offset. And offset gives you an option to go from the range or the cell as many columns you want right or left, and as many rows as you want up and down. So I want to stay in the same row, so I'm going to do 0 for row offset. And for column, I want it to go one column right, so I'm going to do 1. And that's going to go one column right from the cell that was modified. And then I'm going to do dot again. And for this, we should have something like set value. And this should allow us to just type something here. So like, for example, I could do hello. So now again, I'm going to grab all of this and put it here. And we'll comment this because we don't want that. So now what's going to happen at this point? If I save this, go back, I type something in this amount column, you can see after I enter, it ran the script and it enters hello in the cell next to it. It shouldn't happen if I do it, for example, here, because we have those guards to only do this when that happens in the third column, when the row number is, you know, not less than 2 and so on. So there it is. Now, instead of hello, let's just add a timestamp here. So it gives us the date and time. So I'm going to clear that from here, go back, and here we'll just basically create a new date object for the time being, like so. Save it. So now what's going to happen if I enter something in that cell, it should enter like here. If I type something, change it, see, it gives me this. Now, it gives you date and time. You can see it in a formula bar, but here it just gives you the date. If you want to change that format, you can by going here and doing date time. And you can see how it gives me both date and time. And any one of these, if I modify, that should happen. Now, we probably want to do this formatting for this whole column. So we have date and time for all of them. And if I go back and modify this again, it should change that timestamp and update it, right? So now we have this timestamp situation that happens. Now let's try to move this to its own function for a second. So I'm going to take this, all of this code that I wrote, I'm going to cut it out of here and create another function. I'm going to go function, add timestamp to sheet 6 or something. You can call it whatever you want. Just make sure you don't do any special characters or spaces. I'm going to paste all of that code here that I wrote before. And all I'm going to do is just add an argument E here, so we have access to this E from here. And then I'm going to run that within this onEdit function right there. So now if I save this, this should accomplish the same thing. This function should run. It should then run this other function, which will pass this event to that function. And then we'll do all of these things, and it should still work. So if I go back and, for example, add something here, you can see that this still works. So this brings me to the next thing. So what if I want to do another timestamp, let's say here on this sheet? Now, because I moved it to a separate function, I can actually do something similar here. So let's say I have something like this here, but they are in this first two columns. And again, I want to be able to type in this amount cells and timestamps to go here in the next column to the right? Now, this is the sheet called sheet 8. So what I can do, I can basically, again, for simplicity, we'll just copy this whole thing and paste it below. And I'm going to change this function name to sheet, I don't know, something else, as long as it's not the same. I'll call it sheet 8. And here we'll do kind of the same sort of thing. We don't need this console logs really, but I'm going to keep them. But we're going to get the range again. Then we're going to make sure we check the column. Now this time it's not going to be column 3 anymore. It's going to be column 1. So I'm going to change this to 1. And it's not going to be sheet 6 anymore. Now it's going to be sheet 8. So we're going to point to the name of that particular sheet. And then finally, we want this to happen again after starting from row 2 and after. So we'll do this. So what is the difference between this and doing the not doing like this not equals and this not equals? So the difference is that this will check just the value, and this will check the value and the type of the variable. So for example, if I change this like so and then change this in quotes 1 as text, it will still work because it's still going to be true, because even though this is going to be a number 1, it will compare it to text 1 because values are the same for number and text. It will still be true. But if I do this, then they're now no longer the same because one is text, the other one is a number. So that's really the difference between doing the double and doing the just single equals. So finally, when I did all of these changes, again, it's going to be one column to the right. All of that part is the same. I want this function to be run too, and that would be here. So on edit, now we can have multiple things. So like I said, this is why we want to separate this, because now we can do different things within this on edit in different locations. So if I go to this and I go and enter, let's say, something in this cell, you can see how we add a timestamp now to this one as well. And I'm going to do this date and time. And this should still work. So not over timestamp, but if I just type here, go over here, that should work. Could you explain how to add a timestamp in a different sheet? Yeah, we can do that, I guess. So let's say we also want to add a timestamp in a different sheet. So let's say we want to keep a new sheet here. I'm going to open one, and I'm going to call it logs. So let's say we want to keep some logs of things that are changing here. Basically, like if you enter something in this amount column, we want to keep a log of that. And we want to say that in this date and time, this cell C2 was modified from this particular worksheet, something like that. So I'll just add those columns. I'll do like date, I'll do sheet, and I'll do cell. Something like that. So let's say we wanted to add that here when we modify one of these. Let's go with sheet 6. That's the one I'm going to do. So for that, let's again do, I guess we could do it within this function, but we'll just keep this separate. So I'll just copy this and create another function here. And we'll call this one add logs for sheet 6, was it? Yeah. Something like that. And looks like I did, where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay, good. So that's now my new function. I'm probably going to just close these two for now so it doesn't get on the way. So now we need to run that function. So let's say now we want to do this. We want to add a log to that other sheet when basically changes are made. And again, the logic is going to be if the changes are made here in sheet 6 in this area, then I want to add that information as logs here on the sheet. So what I'm going to do here, I already have what I need. I have the cell information here that gives me what cell it was. I have the sheet name information here, what sheet it was. I could also do the column number and stuff. I don't know if you care about that. Now this guard will be the same. If it's, we want to check if it's in column 3, sheet 6, those things are going to remain the same. Now what we do want to do now, instead of doing this offset in row modified like this, is no longer valid. So what we do want to do now, we want to add the log to this worksheet logs down here. And to access that, we can, again, in this E, we have source. And within this source, that source will be that active your current spreadsheet, the whole spreadsheet with all the sheets in it. Now, within that spreadsheet, we could get a worksheet. So I can do get sheet by name. And the name of the sheet that I've created, I believe, was logs, if I'm not mistaken, right here. So I'll just save this in a variable. I'll just say const target ws for target worksheet equals this. So that now is our target worksheet right here. So in our target worksheet, because it's a worksheet, we could have all the methods that we have in a worksheet. And again, the way you can get those, since this is not going to give us autocomplete, we can basically go here and do something like spreadsheet app.get active spreadsheet and do something like get active sheet or something like that. And that should give us, oops, let's fix this. That should give us the active spreadsheet. So at this point, if I dot, that would be things that are hopefully available. Well, apparently that did not give me any autocomplete. Let's see what I did wrong. On line 58, it complains about a bracket. So let me see where that, oh, because of this dot. Let me remove that dot for now. Okay, fair enough. So let's get back to this and hit dot and see if that gives me, still doesn't give me an autocomplete. Oh, you know what? I did get active spreadsheet twice, of course. Get active sheet is what we want. So now if I dot, that gives me things that are available on the worksheet itself. Now on this, we should have something like append row, which, see, it gives me an example. You can do an array of like data you want to pass. And that's what we want to use. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to comment this out. And we're going to use that over here. And in that row, we want to add some information. And if you remember the order in which I had these, it was date, then sheet, then the cell. So the first column in this square brackets in this array is going to be that new date to give us the timestamp, comma. The second column should be here, the worksheet. And the worksheet is this. Comma. And the last one was the cell. So I can do this one. Oops. Let's just copy that and paste it here. Let's save this. And let's see if this works. So that's the information I want to store there. So I'm going to save this, go back. Now this is going to be our logs. So I'm going to go to sheet 6. I don't know if I did add this function already here. It looks like I did. It's good enough. So I'll go back now and try to type something here and see if this works. So I'm going to do something like 32, hit enter. Now this adds a timestamp here. Let's see if the logs have our information. And there it is. See, we have the stamp, we have the sheet, and apparently this didn't give me the cell. I didn't probably copy paste the right thing. Let's go back and fix that. So this should be, see, I did get sheet name. I don't know how I did this, but somehow I overwrote that A1 notation thing. So let's go and figure out what it was. So that's what it should be. Get A1 notation. Let's actually put this back here. And also have it here. And we don't want this get sheet part. This whole thing is one line. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see. Save it. So there it is. So now hopefully this time when I do this, it's not going to say sheet 6. It's going to say which tab. Let's delete this from here. So if I go here, I'm going to modify, let's say this one, like so. And that should trigger this. And if I go to logs, apparently that did not work. I did mess something up, I guess, in the process of doing this. Or maybe it's just running. Let's see. It says failed. Let's take a look. Get A1 notation is not a function. Get sheet? I thought I removed get sheet. Oh, it's here that I didn't remove it. Okay, fair enough. We'll fix that. Save it, and now we should have this work the way it should. So 55, let's see if there is more. Maybe I made more mistakes. So we'll go back. Seems like this worked. See, it says sheet 6, C3 cell. That's what was modified. Now if I go and modify this C10 cell, if I go to logs, you'll see, there you go. So now we are writing to a whole different sheet, as you can see. And as we keep adding this, that's still going to do that. So that's how you could work on a different sheet and add to a different sheet if you wanted to. And that should work. So let me take a look at the comments for a second. Username. So the username is something you're not going to be able to do with a regular event here to get who the username is. So generally speaking, you might be able to get who the user is if you set up an actual trigger. So what you would have to do instead of doing this onEdit, if you want this to be able to grab user's name information, because by default, this regular onEdit function doesn't have access to any personal information from the user. Because if you need personal information from the user has to specifically grant access to that information. So what you would do onEdit special, something like that. And this would not run anymore by default. And then you could go to this little clock on the left and click on this add trigger. And here do that onEdit special function right there. and you would want to run that on edit. I'm not going to set this up, but I'm showing you how you set this up. So if you save this, what's going to happen when somebody new opens the spreadsheet, they will have to grant permission to actually get that information. Otherwise, with that regular setup, there is no way to get users info. So if I do it this way, it will still run it on every, execution, but it's going to run only after the user, specifically when they open the spreadsheet. It's going to give them a prompt. It's going to ask them, do you agree to give this permissions? And if they do, then you would be able to get that info. I'm not going to do this setup. I'm going to cancel and go back to my onEdit. So that's the way you would do that. Now, as far as getting that user's info with that setup, you would basically just get the active user. And I don't know, I guess that would be a part of the session. Yeah. So that would be session get active user. So that would be this. And on this, if you do something like get email, that should be that person's email. Now, again, this, if I just put it here as another column, it's not going to work right now with this basic setup because we can't get users info without their permission. So I'm going to get rid of this part and keep it at this. All right. So that's that. So the last thing I want to go over here, let's close this so it doesn't get on the way, and close this, is that when you do this onEdit functions, and let's actually get rid of one of them for now. And I'm going to also get rid of the log to simplify this. And just do that one trigger like this. So one thing you need to understand is that when you do this onEdit function and you get this range, this literally means a range. It doesn't mean a cell. So right now, if I go here and modify one cell like this, that's that one cell that was modified, right? But for example, if you copy a few cells here and paste it like over here, now it's multiple cells that are modified at this point. And you can see how, surprising to me, it ran it for all the lines. And it actually did add my timestamps. So I guess we don't have to worry about it that much. In this particular instance, you can see even with copy paste, it seems to trigger that for multiple lines. So let's also try this. What happens if that is like something like this? If I copy and paste from here, does it still work the same way? It does. Now, you may want to have some sort of handling for this. So maybe when it's a whole range that's copied, you may want to react on it in a different way, right? So how you would do something like that? Well, here in this range object, again, if I go back, see, we can do something get num rows like this. And that should give us how many rows were modified at that time. So if I copy this, and again, let's just add one of these. Number of rows changed. And we'll just do this get num rows here. Let's just look at that console log to see what that looks like for a second. So if I save this, go back here. If we, for example, modify just one cell like this, if we go back and take a look under executions and open this, you'll see that we have the cells, all this other information we talked about before, but we also have number of rows changed, which is one row that was changed during this process. Now, what if I go here and, for example, copy 3 of them and paste it here? So at this point, if we go back and take a look, it's this one, it's still running. I'm going to give it a second and we'll click on this. Hopefully it will have the log. See, number of rows changed. Now we have 3. So now using this, we can now know whether it was multiple rows that we have to deal with, or it was just a single row that was modified. You could now react to that information. So I don't know. So let's say, for example, just for a basic example, let's say the way we want this to work, if you grab these 3 cells, copy them, and paste them here. So if you have 3 things, we would like to sum all of these up, those 3 numbers, and do something with that total and put that total maybe here instead of putting the timestamp there. That could be a possibility, right? So how would you do something like that? So I'm going to go back and I would say, basically I would do an if statement to check whether I have to deal with a single cell or I have to deal with a whole range of cells. Or I could just simply think about this whole thing as a range of cells the entire time. Because if you remember this cell range, it is a range. So from that range, we could, for example, do something like get value or get values. Now get value gets only the first value basically from the range. So if you have a whole range, it's just going to give you the first one. Get values should give you an array of all of them. Let's try to just use get values on a single cell and see what we actually get out of it. So I'm just going to comment this out, save this, and go back. For now, I'll just comment this line out too. And we'll take this range modified and do get values like so. And for now, let's just start by console logging this so we can see what happens. Like this. So if I save this, go back now, and let's start by typing one cell right here. I'm going to type like 34, hit enter. Let's see if that works. Now remember, I removed the timestamp, so there's not going to be any timestamp anymore. We want to go and take a look at the log and see what happens here. So I'm going to go to executions, and this is what completed. And you can see that I got that number in this array structure. Even though it was a single cell, I still got an array of arrays of that one value, that's 34. However, if I go back now and copy, let's say, these 3 cells and paste it over here, like so, we should be able to see that once we open this, now we get that whole range with all those values. So we get that entire range, and out of that range, we can get all those values. So now I can basically deal with this with any array. So I can go back and let's say our objective is to right now put whatever the total was of all of them together and put them over here or something like that. So what we'll do, we'll use the same thing here to put the value, but before we put the value there, let's start by getting the total. So first, let's save this in a variable of these values. So I'll just call it const cell values, and we'll save this in a variable. And now, because it's an array, that cell values, we should be able to do like for each loops, map, I don't know, reduce, all these different methods. So I guess the fancy way here would be to do something like reduce and use this array method to basically loop through all of them and get your final result out of it. But let's just keep it simple. So I'll just do for each on this one, because reduce is kind of complicated, especially if you're new to this sort of thing. So what I will do, I will loop through this cell values, and if you remember, it's bunch of values. And each time it's going to give me one of the rows in those. In that row, we have a column, which is the first column in that copy pasted range. We're dealing with one column, so I guess It's always going to be one column. And to get to it, we'll do R0 to get to that value in that column. Now what we'll do, we'll just store a variable. And here is where I'm going to do let instead of const, because this is a variable I want to change. So I'm going to do total, and I'll initially set it to 0. And what I'll do here, every time I'll make my total equals whatever that total is plus that value from that loop, R0, like this. Now again, there are more fancy ways of writing this. You could do like plus equals and write this, and you could have used reduce instead of doing all of this, but let's make it accessible like this. So we have the value, so we'll just keep running this loop. So we'll take the first 0, then to that 0 we'll add the first number from that loop, so that's going to be like 76, and then 32, and then 34. We'll keep adding all of those together until we get our new total. And then we can grab that total and use it. So again, this is not an example of something you would do, but this should give you an idea how you would deal with that whole range if your objective is to deal with the whole range. So now I can put that total, again, by offsetting from that range one column to the right. So let's save this and try this and see how it works. So I'm going to go here and start by entering a single number. So I'll go here and enter like 4, hit enter. And for a single number, it's just going to be that number. Now, this, as you can see, gives me a date because we formatted this as date and time. Now I'm going to take this and format it as number now because we're going to be dealing with numbers at this point. So see that total for 4 is 4, which is just one cell. Now let's copy a range and paste it here. And see, now we basically grab all of this. We summed it together to get this 142 in that loop, and we dealt with it and we put it here. You could do different things, whether it's a range or it's a row. And all of that, now you could do if statements using all of these variables. Like you could check if the number of rows is greater than 1, then you know it's a range of stuff. Otherwise, you could know it's a single value. So those are some things that you should know about this onEdit function.